you just let me know when we're going live? We're live? Okay, the St. Tammany Parish Board of Adjustment meeting, June 2nd, is now called to order. Ms. Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fandel,
Yeah.
Mr. Brookter,
Here.
Mr. Snyder,
Here.
Mr. Valentine,
Here.
Mrs. Thomas,
Here.
Mr. Guidry.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
All right, thank you. I want to apologize first for the late starting. We had some technical issues. This is one of our first Zoom meetings. We just had a few technical issues, so we want to apologize for getting started a little bit late, but we're going to try to hopefully make up some of the time. Appreciate everybody signing on in Zoom. I have a few announcements before we get started. The appeals, if someone may not go along with our appeal, you can appeal my decision of the Board of Adjustment to the District Court. Public speaking, each side will have 10 minutes per side and 5 minutes for rebuttal. When you wish to speak, you'll see at the bottom, you should have a raised hand. Please click on your raised hand so you'll be recognized to speak. If you're operating on a PC, when you're speaking, you need to hold down your space bar key as you're speaking. If you are on an iPhone or other device, just, I think you see the raised hand, but you don't have to hold down this space bar to speak. We'll unmute, just make sure you unmute your mic, and that should be located at the bottom of your screen. You should see a mute, a microphone, either it says mute or unmute. So once you get recognized, please make sure your mic is unmuted. So we'll start the meeting. We have the approvals of the March 3rd meeting. Can I get a motion on the minutes for the March 3rd?
So moved. Moved to approve.
We have a motion to approve. One other announcement on the board. When we vote, would you please vote with hands, holding up your hand, so we can get an accurate count of the vote. So we have a motion to approve the minutes. All in favor, would you please raise your hands? Okay. You got it. We're gonna have one alternate serve since we only have 4 members. So we need one alternate to serve as a member on this board today. So Jules, would you like to serve on that board?
Sounds good. Yes.
Jules, you'll be on the serving member of the board today. All right, go dig into our cases. Our first case is BOA case number 2019-1702 BOA. This was postponed from the 12/03/19 meeting, the January 7th, 2020 meeting, the February 4th, 2020 meeting, the March 3rd, 2020 meeting. This is a request by applicant in an A1 suburban zoning district for an after-the-fact waiver to require front yard, side, and rear no-cut buffers. The property is located at 28132 Pine Cone Road, Abita Springs, Louisiana. The applicant and representative is Loretta Jorel. Request by applicant for an after-the-fact variance to waiver to require 25-foot no-cut buffer along the front and the 50-foot no-cut buffer on the sides and the rear of the property. Staff comments, please.
Regan will present the case.
I'm sorry, say again.
Regan Contours will present the case.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. The after-the-fact variance request is to allow for the site to be developed, maintained as a pasture for horses. The site and landscape plans have been submitted for review, showing the following. The wetlands. The applicant shall implement the restoration of approximately 1 acre of wetland per the requirements of the Corps of Engineer Permit MV9 2019-01 124-59. The north buffer. The landscape plan shows a 10-foot buffer on the north side of the parcel. The ordinance requires a 50-foot buffer. The proposed plantings in this buffer include 14 trees, 45 shrubs, along the 710-foot length of the property. For the south buffer, the landscape plan shows a 10-foot buffer on the south side of the parcel. The ordinance requires a 50-foot buffer. Proposed plantings include 30 trees and 30 shrubs along 948 feet of length of property. For the west buffer, the landscape plan shows 24 existing trees to remain and no additional planting proposed. No buffer dimension is noted on the plan. For the street buffer, the landscape plan shows a row of shrubs to be planted on the east side of the parcel along Pinecone Road. The ordinance requires a 25-foot street buffer. The site has been difficult to maintain due to the high volume of water running through it. The plan represents an effort to balance the required buffers and the need to manage the water on and off the property and to provide for the horses. Staff does not object to the proposed plan as it provides screening and buffering to meet the intent of the ordinance. Approval should be subject to the following additional information provided on the plan. The width of the buffers proposed to indicate if the west buffer will be a no-cut buffer where the ditch and the creek are, west of the ditch and the creek, to be maintained with grass and 44 trees as shown on the plan, and indicate the estimated time to complete the replanting. Completion is subject to the final landscape inspection.
Is the applicant present?
I'm here presenting, my name is Sean Burks. I'm with JV Burks and Associates, representing the Geralds on this piece of property.
Mr. Burks, would you also give your address, please?
Yes, our address is 1805 Shortcut Highway, Slidell, Louisiana, 70458.
Mr. Burks, do you have anything further to add?
Just from a history standpoint, this is a project that I would consider has been a joint project between the BOA, St. Tammany Parish, and the client. We've gone back and forth several times. The last charge that we got back in March from the BOA was we are really concerned about the drainage, and really we want to make sure you get the drainage taken care of. And then we also want you to work with the parish with regard to the buffers. I'm here kind of telling you today that the drainage study, drainage plans has been reviewed and approved by the St. Tammany Parish Engineering Office. The buffers that we have proposed have been discussed and worked with staff. And in regard to the wetlands, to give you an update, is that area we have completed the restoration and that has been submitted to the Corps. So they know that their plan for restoration has been done and has been submitted over to them. So they'll probably go out and review and see if they're okay with it, but that has been taken care of as well too. In regard to the western border, my understanding is that that is going to remain as is, which is right now it's treed and it has grass growing on there. And my understanding is that we can definitely put a clarification issue on the plan to show that the buffer has been what the actual distance is. But one of the main things we just want to caution, there is a stream that runs through the western border, and we would just want to make sure that nothing is done in that area that would slow down the flow of water through that rear property. So I'm here if anybody has any questions, and we can hopefully move our way from here.
Tom, you have a question?
Yes, I have a bunch of questions. Number one, when Mr. Burke started to talk, he said this was a effort between the engineering department, the BOA, and the client or the petitioner here. But he can't leave out, and he mentioned that he can't leave out the Corps of Engineers. And with regard to that western edge, that's very important over there. There's a stream back there that's silting up from from the destroying of this property. There's a lot of runoff from this property, and it's going into that stream. And we've got then resulting from that, we've got flooding on a home and some of the homes around there, plus flooding and drainage problems, flooding on the street around there. The plan that Reagan, Ms. Contra, described, the plan is, in my estimation, the plan is insufficient. There are not enough plantings, and there's nothing, especially the western and street buffer. They need to be addressed with significant plantings. So anyway, and I have some other points, but I would ask for a response.
Yes. In regard to the creek that's in the back of the property, I've inspected it on several occasions during rains, after rains, when the water's flooding. There is not an issue with sedimentation flowing into that western stream. What I can say is that with regard to the drainage plan, which has not been installed yet because of we don't know where the location of the stream is, our swales are going to be on this piece of property. Those have been calculated. Those have been reviewed and approved by the engineering office. So in regard to causing flooding, there's you have a stream on the back piece of this property, but it's also back along a lot of other pieces of property. And the water appears to flow pretty well, even during high rain events. So I have not seen that, Mr. Ballantyne. I know you've made that comment several times, and I've gone out to try to witness it, and I just haven't seen it. So if in regard to the western edge, I do think it's important to keep that area available for maintaining that section. The stream flow is pretty fast along that back side back there. And there does appear to be some siltation that's further upstream of this piece of property that's offside of this piece. But as far as going back to this plan and going back to us moving forward, is we've addressed the drainage issues to the satisfaction of the engineering department. We've addressed the restoration issues to the Corps of Engineers. And now we were just awaiting the BOA to hopefully allow us to keep pushing forward on this project so we can actually dig the drainage ditches the way we have on the plans.
Burns, I'm going to recognize you in the second time, but I just wanted to say, because I just see some names. I know in prior meetings, we had people opposed to this case. Do we have any people here want to speak in opposition to this case? I see Mr. Maddox.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Maddox.
All right,
You
my
gotta
name is Sean Maddox, and my only concern remaining here really is on that northern border. I understand that staff has indicated that there were plans submitted, and I understand that it is the discretion of the Board of Adjustments to approve those plans along with staff. I haven't seen that in the meeting packets for the last 3 meetings, so it would just be nice if that could be published so that those of us who live in that area would have the chance to review them.
Is there anything else, Mr. Maddox?
That's really it.
Okay. Tom, you got another question?
Yes, I do. This is for Mr. Burke. Where are the stumps?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking about.
We have a aerial photograph from 2017 of that particular piece of property. And it was covered, it was totally forested in 2017. Now it has been completely cleared, completely destroyed. And where are the stumps from the trees that were removed from that property?
I bet. Come click on so I can talk to him.
Mr. Valentine, what I would say is the site definitely was cleared and grubbed. I'm not exactly sure where it was hauled off to by whatever contractor. I'm sure it's as typical places wherever they would do those things.
Let me tell you what my problem is. I believe that those stumps are still on the property, and they've been buried by all the dirt that has been trucked in there and spread on that property. And that dirt is washing off. Every time we get a rain, that dirt is washing off and going into the creek and the stream, and the other drainage swales that are going to the creek. So there's an enormous amount of dirt that would have had to been brought in there to bury the stumps.
I can't comment on the stumps. I don't see burial grounds. I've walked the site myself.
I have too.
I don't know where you're going with that, Mr. Valentine.
Well, no, where I'm going with it is I'm saying, I believe that the stumps are buried. And in order to bury those stumps where you can't see them now, you can't find if you went out and looked right now, you couldn't find a stump. And I believe they're under all that dirt, and that's all that dirt is washing off the property. And that's leading to the silting and drainage problems.
I guess what I can tell you, Mr. Valentine, is that a wetland delineation was done on the overall property, and soil probe borings that go down 18 or so inches or so were shot throughout the site. Stumps were not located. Whenever the Corps came in for the restoration plan, they wanted us to, in case any stumps were in the ground, they wanted us to go around them in case we encountered them. And they did not find in stumps whenever they dug the swales down through the property. So, I can't stipulate.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Louis.
we've been going over this particular case for the last 3 or 4 months. And in our last meeting, we asked the staff if they would work with Mr. Durrell and their folks to come up with a solution. So it sure sounds like to me that they have done what we asked them to do. I would like to make a motion to grant the variance.
Okay, we have a motion. I have some other hands that are raised up. I'd want to recognize, but since you're making a motion, I have to see if we get a second on that motion, and then I can ask, we can open it up for discussion. So we have a motion on the floor, and your motion, repeat that again, Mr. Brookton?
Well, to grant the variance.
All right, we have a motion to grant the variance. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion to grant the variance and a second. So now we're open discussion on the motion. Do you have any questions? And I know Ms. Sigsworth, you did have your hand up, and I'll try to recognize you later, but right now we do have a motion that was presented, and we have to adjust the motion. Do we have any questions on the motion, Mr. Valentine, and then Mr. Guidry?
I would bow to Mr. Gidry. He can go ahead and go, and then I will go after him.
All right, Mr. Gidry.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask that the motion be amended to include approval should be subject to the following additional information provided on this plan as requested by staff.
Are you offering an amendment to the motion?
Yes.
Well, we have an amendment to the motion. Do I have a second to that amendment?
Second.
We have a amended motion. So let's discuss the amendment first. Any discussion on the amendment to the motion?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes. What we're voting on here is a significant waiver of the buffer zones and setbacks across the entire property. And just one of those, what we're doing on one side, we're giving up 50 feet times 750 feet. That's 37,500 feet, which is just a little under an acre. So we're granting, what we're voting on here is that they wouldn't have to pay any attention to that buffer zone. They're, I guess, doing away with, reducing it considerably. So buffers are there for a purpose, with plants and trees. And I'll say again, I think the plan is inadequate. Number one, I think that this should really be between the Corps of Engineers and the engineering department. I don't feel that we're sufficiently have the expertise to really gauge this after the land was destroyed. We cannot, by doing this, we're going to limit the restoration of the land to the fullest extent, by granting these wide, doing away with these wide setbacks. They've been waiting, like Mr. Brookter said, they've been waiting on us for months. And I don't think that this plan goes far enough in restoring that property, the restoration of the property. And that's all I have to say.
Any other board members have anything to say on the amendment? Hearing no more questions or comments on the amendment, would everyone please vote on the amendment? Raising your hand. All in favor of the amendment? All opposed? Okay, thank you. All opposed to the amendment, please raise your hands. The amendment passes, if I'm not mistaken. Amendment passes. Okay. Now we will go to the main motion. Mr. Snyder? Did you have a question?
No, I just I was using the yes button to vote.
Okay,
But-
okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just bear with me for 1 second. The amendment passed, but before we can vote on the first amendment, we need to let everyone speak in the audience on the public. And I see Miss Lisa Sigsworth had her hand raised, and I'd like to recognize Miss Sigsworth.
Hi, can you
Ms.
hear me?
Sigsworth? Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. I want to thank all of you for being on Zoom today. This is a new format. Since I have started with advanced putting up the house on the property, I'm unsure as to the plans that were submitted earlier as adjusted with the plans that they now have coming up on their house and their big foundation that they put in and everything going forward. I understand that there was an issue yesterday with their drainage inspection. So with the original plans put in, how does that adjust now to the original plans that they submitted for replanting? I mean, it it looks like it's going to be skewed. Their original plans that they submitted to the parish is going to be skewed now with the house and the house pad and everything that they've done so far.
All right, Ms. Segura, I'm gonna turn that over to, I guess, staff, because if they're applying for a permit, we're not looking at their permit and what they're building. We're just looking at the trees that were taken down. So I'm gonna refer this to staff. Just a second. Do you want to speak on that? Huh? Just a minute, we got Ross, the planning director, to be speaking, just to answer you, Ms. Sigsworth.
Hey, this is Ross Liner, Director of Planning and Development. I believe, and I was in another area, it's a little bit difficult to hear, but you're asking, what was the question again?
The question, she was asking about the house that they're getting ready to build. I mean, we're not looking at the.
Sure, that is a separate issue than the setbacks as far as it relates to landscaping and buffering. The house is totally separate. The property is huge, and it's just two separate issues that don't have to, I guess, they just don't stop one from the other. So again, I missed your question, but they're separate issues.
I can verify and clarify with you if you'd like me to.
And that you can do when he applies for his permit to build a house. I mean, right now, we're not looking at the permit on the house building or any fill that is bringing in. We're looking at, unfortunately, we can only look at what has been presented to us. That is the no cut buffers. And that's what we're addressing today, is just the no cut buffers.
Correct. Everything for the house met code. So I was able to get permitting.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The house, everything met code as far as permitting is required, is concerned. So they submit a set of plans, we review them, and everything met code. So we're able to issue a permit for that.
Okay, I don't know if you heard that, Ms. Sigsworth, but they
Yes.
applied for a permit for the house and everything met code as far as their house, and they submitted. So that's not an issue that we can address here today. Is there any other comments from the audience? Mr. Maddox, I still see you have your hand raised. I don't know if you have another comment. Mr. Maddox? You still have your hand raised. Do you have a comment to make, sir?
Well, I do tend to agree. Again, we're kind of operating a little bit in the dark because those plans weren't submitted. But the last ones we say, I do kind of agree that I'm not sure they're sufficient. It's just my opinion.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Maddox? Do we have any? And this is new for us doing this Zoom, so you have to. We have to. I want to apologize. We're not. So anyone wants to join in this case? I don't see anyone's hand raised, so I'm going to go, now I'm going to turn it back over to the board. Do we have any more comments or questions from the board members concerning the motion that's on the floor? Hearing no comments or questions, would all the board members please vote by raising your hand? Ms. Secretary, you have that? Would you please, Ms. Secretary, would you give the results of the voting, please?
Yes, motion pass.
The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank
Moving to
you.
our next case is BOA case number 20201827 BOA, request by applicant in an A4 single-family residential zoning district to reduce the required rear yard setback from 25 feet to 12 feet to allow for the construction of a patio cover. The property is located at 148 Pebble Beach Drive, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant representative is Walter Stone. The applicant is requesting to reduce the required rear yard setback from 25 feet to 12 feet to allow for the construction of a patio cover. Staff comments, please.
The request is to allow for the construction of an attached patio cover over an existing deck. Staff does not recommend approval of the requested variance, considering that no hardship has been demonstrated to support the encroachment within the required rear yard setback.
Is the applicant present?
Yes, Walter Stone here.
Would you please state your name and address for the records? And
My name's Walter Stone. I live at 148 Pebble Beach Drive, Slidell, Louisiana.
Mr. Stone, do you have anything further to add?
My situation is that in the world we're currently living in, my little backyard is getting to be more and more attractive, and I really look to use it a whole lot more. Understanding that I didn't know I needed to demonstrate a hardship, but the hardship, depending upon how it needs to be qualified or what you're looking for, what happened is when I first moved into the house, if you're looking at my survey, you'll see there's an upper wooden deck. That deck was built around a fairly good sized river birch tree. As the tree grew, it leaved out and it blocked my view out the back of my house. My wife wanting to enjoy the view, we got the tree cut down. Well, once the tree was removed, we lost all our shade. This cover would replace that shade, and we'll be able to enjoy the backyard come summertime again.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes. I think that we've had many cases having to do with rear setbacks on waterfront property. And in my opinion, the setback on waterfront property and between the residence and the water does not work, does not apply. And I would like to make a motion to approve the variance as requested.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Mr. Brook, the second. Do we have any discussion on this motion or questions? Hearing and seeing none, would everyone please vote on the motion? The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next case is BOA case number 20201829 BOA. Request by applicant in an A4A single-family residential zoning district to reduce the required front yard setback from 25 feet to 15 feet, to reduce the required rear yard setback from 21 feet to 20 feet, to allow for the placement of a manufactured home. The property is located at 38548 James Crosby Road, Pearl River, Louisiana. The applicant and representative is Ms. Honeycutt. The applicant is requesting to reduce the required front yard setback from 25 feet to 15 feet and to reduce the required rear yard setback from 21 feet to 20 feet to allow for the placement of a manufactured home. Staff comments, please.
The objective of the request is to reduce the required front and rear yard setback to allow the placement of a 924 square foot manufactured home. Staff does not recommend approval of the requested variance, considering that no hardship has been demonstrated. The objective of this request is to reduce the required front and rear yard setbacks to allow for the placement of a 924 square foot manufactured home. Staff does not recommend approval of the requested variance, considering that no hardship has been demonstrated.
Is the applicant present?
Yes, I am.
Would you please state your name and address for the records, please?
Calinthia Honeycutt, 2900 Athena's Lane, Latonia, Georgia, 30038.
Ms. Honeycutt, do you have anything further to add?
No, that's it.
Okay. Do we have any questions of Ms. Honeycutt from the board? Tom, you raised your hand?
Yes, Ms. Honeycutt, have you already purchased the manufactured home?
Yes, I have.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Go ahead, Tom. You making a motion?
Yes, I'm gonna make a motion. I went out there and looked at, I've been out and visited the property, and I assure you there is hardship. And so I would make a motion to approve the request for this variance as requested.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Brook, the second. Do we have any discussion or questions? Hearing none, would everyone please vote by raising your hand? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next case is BOA case number 2020-1830 BOA, request by applicant in an A8 multifamily residential zoning district to waiver the required front, sides, and rear buffers and the required number of Class A and Class B trees and shrubs to allow for the construction of a multifamily residential development. The property is located southeast side of Marina Boulevard, Mandeville, Louisiana. The applicant is Marina Boschan LLC, Gary Griggs, the representative, Jones Fussell, Paul Marone. The applicant is requesting to waive the required front, sides, and rear buffers and the required number of Class A and Class B trees and shrubs. Staff comments, please.
Okay,
Reagan?
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, the applicant is requesting a waiver of the required 25-foot street buffer, 10-foot sides and rear buffers, and required number of trees and shrubs, which are 20 Class A trees, 20 Class B trees, and 21 shrubs, to allow for the construction of a multifamily residential development consisting of 5 boathouses. The parcel has an average depth of 87 feet from the water, from front to rear, of which approximately 50% is in the water and 37 feet is land abutting Marina Boulevard. The landscape plan shows a total of 35 trees proposed to be planted along Marina Boulevard and Nico Drive. Staff does not have any objection to the requested variances, subject to submitting a scaled landscape plan stamped by a landscape architect or landscape contractor, identifying the species and sizes of the proposed trees and a timeline to complete the planting of the trees.
The applicant present?
Yes.
Representative?
Paul Marone on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Fandle, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Would you please give us the address, Mr. Marone?
Yes, Paul Marone, PO Box 1810, Covington, Louisiana 70434, appearing on behalf of Mr. Griggs and Marina Beauchene LLC.
Do you have anything further to add, Mr. Marone?
Just a little background, Mr. Griggs and other members of the board. As many of you all probably already know, Marina Beauchene was developed probably about 30 years ago. And at that time, the current configuration was laid out, and the boathouses that Mr. Griggs, my client, intends to construct, a portion of them were actually constructed at that time. Some of them were not, although the foundation, the concrete piles and so forth were put in at that time. So the boathouses that he intends to construct now are identical to what you would see if you go out to Marina Beauchene currently. And so what gives rise to the need to the variance is that now we're 30 years later, the Unified Development Code doesn't really fit that type of product this many years later. So that's the reason for the request. But again, it is identical to what is already out there. If you were to drive into Marina Beauchene, there are units immediately next door to this parcel that would be consistent with what we're talking about. We are proposing to mitigate with plantings outside of the footprint of this track, but on the marina track. And we have no problem complying with submitting the scaled and signed landscape plan. In fact, we thought we had done that. We have a landscape architect who has already looked at that, so we will comply with that. And with regards to the timing, the only thing I would say is that the owners of the marina, of which Mr. Griggs is one, is in the process of updating and improving the marina. So there is construction ongoing outside of this particular project. We would like to have that construction completed before we plant these trees to ensure the survivability of the trees. So in that regard, we would ask that or propose that the timing for the planting just be prior to any occupancy of the boathouses that Mr. Griggs would like to construct. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions that any of the board members or the staff may have.
See, Ms. Lambert.
Paul, would it mean in the fall or next year, or do you have a timeline?
Certainly within the year. We wouldn't want to plan in the summertime. We'd want to plan in the winter or the spring. So maybe if we could have, within the year, that would get us to the early summer of next year, which would should be plenty of time to get everything done, find a good period of moist weather to be able to put the trees in.
Regan, would you like to add to that?
No, I think as long as we get it done, I wouldn't say we're going into June now, so it's a little late for planting. So I would say maybe through the spring of next year. Usually I would say, by the end of May, by 2020, what is that, 2021, May 2021. Is that something that could work for your construction schedule?
Yes.
Okay. I think that would work fine.
That's acceptable.
So Valentine, see you have your hand up.
Two things. One, as my esteemed colleague, Mr. Schneider pointed out, when we're doing the Slidell case, here we are, the water as backyard in Mandeville and Beauchene. So that's one. And number two is I would like to make a motion to approve the variance request as submitted, subject to the planning timing and the landscape plan being submitted.
We have a motion. We have a second.
I second.
Mr. Brook, the second. Do we have any questions or discussion? Hearing and seeing none, would everyone please vote by raising your hand in favor? Or motion carries. Thank you. Our next case is BOA case number 20201856 BOA. Request by applicant in a PBC2 planned business campus zoning district to remove existing live oak trees to allow for the expansion of a regional pond. The property is located at South Side, Oshner Boulevard, Covington, Louisiana. The applicant is Allstate Financial Company, Josh Weiner. The representative is Collin Associates, James Powell Jr. The applicant is requesting to remove existing live oak trees to allow for the expansion of a regional pond. Staff comments, please.
As per the UDC section 130-1975, live oaks are a protected species of tree. The applicant is seeking a variance to remove 15 of the 19 existing live oaks totaling 356 inches in caliper to expand an existing regional detention pond. The proposed 4 live oaks to be preserved will equal a total of 115 inches of caliper. The mitigation plan shows 16 2-inch live oaks proposed to be planted within the Oshner Boulevard street buffer in lieu of the required Class A and Class B trees and shrubs. Planting of 50 2-inch live oaks along Oshner Boulevard as shown in the attached drawing, and a request to use previously planted 200 to 300 trees along Oshner Boulevard and Watercross Parkway of payment of the remainder of mitigation inches of live oak trees to the St. Tammany Parish tree banks. Considering that the live oak trees can be replanted or mitigated on and off site, staff is not opposed to the first 2 requests, as the purpose of the removal of the trees is to increase the volume of regional detention pond, subject to the following: planting a 35-foot buffer, the street buffer, with the required number of trees and shrubs per code, and dispersal of the proposed 16 live oak trees within the street buffer and other buffers. Secondly, replanting of the 50 2-inch live oaks along Oshner Boulevard and provision of a timeline to complete the replanting and tree maintenance agreement. Staff is not in favor of the 3rd request and recommends grading of the live oak trees based on the condition of these in the field to determine the remaining mitigation inches to be paid into the St. Tammany Parish Tree Bank.
Is the applicant present?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Paul Marone here again, this time on behalf of Allstate Financial Company and Mr. Weiner. My address is P.O. Box 1810, Covington, Louisiana 70434. A few additional comments for the board to consider. As Ms. Contois noted, the reason for the request is to enlarge regional detention that is in the area and to bring additional retention and detention capacity to this area off of Oshner Boulevard. This particular site, if you look on the maps that I think will be in your packet, has some frontage along Oshner Boulevard, but is largely a site that that is not visible. It's behind Forest Manor Nursing Home and some of the other improved parcels along that stretch of Oshner Boulevard. We are certainly willing to and agreeable to mitigating the loss of these trees. And as Ms. Contois noted, staff is comfortable with items 1 and 2, and we certainly can and will comply with those. With regards to item 2, the timeline to complete the replanting, we would propose the same timeline that we just talked about in the prior case, which would be maybe the end of May of 2021. And we'll be happy to provide evidence of a maintenance plan. This entire area is under the jurisdiction, if you will, of the Nordulac Property Owners Association. And one of the charges of that association is to maintain the landscape. We're happy to provide that documentation to staff to evidence that. With regards to the 3rd item, we would ask the board to consider what we have proposed as our 3rd prong of the mitigation, and that's to give some credit for the trees that have already been planted in this corridor by my client. Those trees were not required. and they have been planted over the last 3 to 4 years, roughly, maybe some as early as 5 years ago. But to give you an idea of what we're talking about, over 150 crepe myrtle trees, which are now about 10 feet tall, 50 magnolia trees about 20 feet tall, 100 holly trees about 8 feet tall. So these are significant plantings that have been made in that corridor that were not required, but we think make a significant difference. I would also reiterate what I said a minute ago, which was that the trees that we're going to be removing are not street side trees. These were trees that are interior property trees that are not otherwise largely, not otherwise visible, whereas the plantings that we've made are visible. And we think make a profound impact on the streetscape as you go down Watercross Boulevard, Ashner Boulevard. That being said, if it is the will of the board not to grant any benefit from those trees that are there, then we would ask that the board consider allowing us to mitigate for the third prong through the planting in the right-of-way of the future Oshner Road extension. And that right-of-way has been acquired by the parish. That road is intended to be built, and we'll need some beautification. And we'd like to be able to plant the trees in that area if credit can't be given for the trees that are already in place. And in that regard, since I know there may be some questions since the road is not in yet, how do we assure that, one, the road would be built, and what would happen if it doesn't get built? My client would be willing to post a letter of credit for the number of trees to be planted to assure that they will perform. And we are comfortable that even with that posting of the letter of credit, we would be willing to put a drop dead date on that. If for some reason the road built, then that will credit be committed to payment to the tree bank. So I laid that out for your consideration. That is now open for you all to consider. But we would appreciate your consideration, and I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that any of the staff might have or any of the board members.
Okay. Before I open it up to the board, I just want to see if there's anyone in the audience that wants to speak against this. I overlooked that before, but this is kind of new with this Zoom, and see we still have some other people in the online right now. Does anyone want to speak from the audience against this particular proposal? Hearing none, I saw Tom saying, and also saw Brian saying, so I'm going to recognize Tom. You have the floor.
Thank you. Item was on the north side of Oshner Boulevard at the corner where you go into Stone Creek. I had trouble finding, with regard to where the sign was at the corner of Oshner Boulevard and Stone Creek. Where is this? Is it about, say, 100 yards down the street from there where the pond is?
That's a good question, Mr. Ballantyne. It is not on the north side. It would be, the property is on the south side, and I believe it would start. So to give you a point of reference, much of it is behind the Forest Manor nursing home, and the portion that fronts Oshner would be, if I get my bearings right, to the east of that, and then it's kind of an L-shaped parcel. So I think it would be, if you're going down Oshner and Stone Creek's on your right, then the property as you pass Stone Creek would start on your left, and then it would L-shape behind Forest Manor.
Okay, I know where it is. Thank you.
Brian, you had a question? You got on mute, Brian.
Question for staff, Ms. Contois. Some part of this has to do with planting in the median of a boulevard. Do we have limitations in this parish about what cannot be planted there learned from the Metairie lesson of birds and problems. In other words, holly is definitely not usable because of the red berries and birds and a lot of problems. So do we have limitations on what can be planted in a median?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my,
Yes.
can y'all still see me here?
Yeah.
Okay, it's my understanding that a median is gonna be in the right of way. So really, we're gonna have to work with Public Works to see if they would approve any kind of plantings in the right of way, because that is their purview. I believe they've had some discussions previously with Public Works about their current request, but I have not been part of that. So I don't know if Helen might be able to add some information there. But certainly before we approve putting more plantings in the public right of way, we would have to get approval from Public Works on that. To answer your original question, as far as the landscape code goes, that deals specifically with private property, so commercial property. So if it's going to be off the private property, we would have to be dealing with Public Works regulations.
Okay, well, hopefully there'll be some limitations as to what can be planted in a boulevard median, because there can be significant problems.
Do we have any other questions of the applicant?
Right now, we're aware that there's a maintenance agreement between the Wayner Company and, you know, they're maintaining and they have planted some trees in the Northern Lag corridor area. However, the new road is not constructed. The new road is not part of that agreement at this time. And we do not know exactly when it will be constructed. The staff recommendation remains the same.
Mr. Marone, but you mentioned that you, if for some reason this road was not constructed or not put in, that letter of credit would be used then to plant somewhere else? It'd be like going to the tree mitigation?
Yeah, so to clarify that, Mr. Fandle, what we were proposing, since the road is not yet constructed, is that we would post the letter of credit for the cost of those trees and the planting if the road is not constructed, or if for some reason Public Works, we cannot get approval from Public Works for the location of the trees, then the letter of credit would simply be converted to a cash payment to the tree bank to satisfy the requirement.
Okay.
And we would be willing to put a timeline on that conversion so that it doesn't remain out there forever without the mitigation being taken care of.
Okay. Brian, you have another question? I thought I saw something on the side. Tom, I see your hand still up. You have a question?
Well, I think Helen answered it. I was going to ask Reagan whether the landscaping department was generally in agreement with the alternative to item number 3 with that type of approach. Helen's
I don't think we have enough information. We don't know if Public Works would approve that. And I believe Mr. Marone said that that the Property Owners Association would be in charge of maintenance. So I don't know of any Property Owners Association who is taking on that large of a boulevard and maintenance of something that is basically going to be a public road. I just don't know of that happening anywhere else in St. Tammany Parish. So it's really hard to predict what that would be in the future, besides the fact that the road isn't built.
If I could, just one point regarding that Property Owners Association is currently maintaining the multitude of plantings that are in the Watercross and Oshner Boulevard right away now. So they're able to do that if that's something that is acceptable to the board. And again, the idea of posting the letter of credit is to assure that if for any reason that those plantings can't be made, then What staff is recommending here as their third prong is the payment into the tree bank. That letter of credit would assure that that would happen. If for any reason, if the board were to approve plantings in the Oshner Boulevard extension right away, and it didn't happen for any reason, that letter of credit would be there to assure that the cash would be paid into the tree bank.
Cruz,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve based on approval from Public Works, Homeowners Association acceptance, along with the letter of credit with a timeline that says it will be, monies will be put into the tree bank. That seems reasonable to me. If this can't happen, if the extension of Oshner is not completed for any reason, in a specific timeline that we can discuss.
okay, we have a motion. We have to see if we have a second. I see Helen has her hand up, has a comment. But we have to proceed with the motion, see if I get a second on the motion.
I'll second.
We have a second on the motion. Now we can open for discussion. Ms. Lambert, you have a comment?
Yes, I had a discussion with the director of engineering, the parish engineer recently. And we've also had discussion in the past with the director of Public Works. Public Works has not been in agreement of the maintenance of participating in the maintenance of any type of landscaping inside of the parish right away.
Do we have any other comments from the board? Jules?
Helen, did Public Works have to approve the plantings that exist currently in the right-of-way of Oshner Boulevard? I think they mentioned 150 crepes, 50 magnolias, and 100 holly.
I do not know the answer to that question. Maybe Mr. Moran can answer that. Maybe they've decided to take it upon themselves, and maybe they've in their contract or agreement they've stated that they would maintain it.
To my knowledge, and based on what I'm understanding from my client, no, Public Works there was no Public Works approval for the planting of the trees that are in the Oshner Boulevard or Watercross Boulevard rights of way.
Any other questions from the board? Just confirm your motion, Jules, is that if they don't get approval from Public Works, then they would have to plant the tree somewhere else or give to the mitigation bank. Is that correct?
That's how it was stated.
Helen, you have another question?
What would be the timeline to get approval from Public Works? Not knowing exactly when the road will be constructed. At this time, we really don't know when it will be constructed. And in May of next year, the road is definitely not gonna be completed. I've had a recent discussion last week with the parish engineer in that regards.
I'm gonna open and ask Mr. Marone, even though we ain't discussing the motion, but I'm gonna ask you the question, Mr. Marone. In that letter of credit, do you have a time frame in that letter of credit?
We would be open to whatever time frame would be agreeable with staff and Public Works. Ms. Lambert's right. Public Works and engineering will probably have a better idea of if and when that road would be constructed. And then I guess what we would propose is whatever that timeline is, we would match the letter of credit to that anticipated timeline or something close to it. And if the road is not then constructed, then it would, at that point, it would convert to the cash payment to the tree bank.
I would like to confirm that the the discussion that I had last week with Mr. Jay Watson, he clearly stated that, it hasn't gone to bid yet. We don't have a contractor. We do not have a timeline.
Mr. Brookton?
I would like to make an amendment to the motion.
Go ahead, Mr. Brookton.
I want to seek approval for number one, number two. Number three, I think money should be paid to the tree bank.
Okay, so you adding that amendment? Mr. Brookton?
What's that now?
You adding that amendment?
Yes, that's my amendment. I think what we're trying to do with number three is just long-term, and let's just kind of clean it up and make sure that just the money goes into the tree bank right now.
Do we have a second on Mr. Brookton amendment? Hearing no second, the amendment fails. Going back to the same original amendment that Mr. Drews made, do we have any comments on the original amendment? And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Marone, just to clarify, you said you would put a time frame in that letter of credit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we have the main motion on the floor. Is there any more discussion on the main motion? Hearing or seeing none, I'm sorry, Mr. Marone, we closed the floor. It's up just for the board now. Hearing no more comments or questions, would everyone please vote by raising your hand in favor of the motion? All opposed, please raise your hands. So noted. Secretary, will you give the tally of the votes, please?
Unmuted, Helen.
I'm muted. Mr. Brookton voted negative, so I need the secretary to confirm the vote. The motion passes. Thank you.
Helen is muted.
I'm not in control of Helen's mic. Next case is BOA case number 20201858. Request by applicant in the HC3 Highway Commercial Zoning District to remove 5 live oak trees to allow for fill to be placed on the site to elevate finished grade above base flood elevation. The property is located at north side of Pinnacle Parkway, Covington, Louisiana. The applicant is Allstate Financial Company, Josh Weiner. The representative is Duplantis Engineering Group, David Lazar. The applicant is requesting to remove some live oaks to allow for fill to be placed on the site and elevate finished grade above the base flood elevation. Staff comments, please.
The applicant is requesting to remove 6 live oak trees totaling 119 caliper inches in order to place approximately 12 feet of fill on the site, which is currently well below the base flood elevation. Each tree to be removed has been given a C grade, and mitigation for these trees sums up to a total of 60 inches. The replanting plan has been submitted showing 60 inches of live oaks to be replanted on the parcel. Staff is not opposed to the request, subject to the following, providing a timeline to complete the replanting of the live oak trees.
Is the applicant present?
Yes, Mr. Fandel, Paul Marone, one last time for Allstate Financial Company and Mr. Weiner.
You have anything further to add, Mr. Morone?
Just a few comments. This site is in the Pinnacle development. It is near the Mercedes-Benz facility. The parcel in question had some significant elevation changes. So there is a good bit of grading work that is going on there that's requiring or necessitating the removal of the trees. As far as the timeline for completion, what we would propose for consideration is that the construction on that site be allowed to take place to help the viability and survivability of those trees. For fear that if the replantings are done too early, then through the construction process, those trees would be less likely to survive. So what we would propose would be that that we tie the trees, the planting of the trees, to the prior to the occupancy of the construction that would take place on that lot. We would file, if we're granted approval, we would file that approval with the clerk, make it an obligation running with the land so that it would bind any future owner. But to have that there and to tie it to prior to occupancy on that lot would be our proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Morone. Is there anyone else in the audience that wants to speak for or against this? Hearing or seeing no hands being raised, does the board have any questions? Mr. Snyder?
Yes, the staff recommends that a timeline be provided. And, but from what Mr. Morone said, there was no definite date. And we did, I'm sorry?
Prior to occupancy.
Well, yeah, but that's rather nebulous. And I would want to put a date, 1 year or some length of time. Certainly, we've already talked about it's too late for planting right now. But if Mr. Morone's client would agree to 1 year or 18 months or some length of time that we can nail down, I think that would better satisfy staff. Mr.
Morone, do you have a comment to
that? Yes. Certainly putting a definitive back-end date, as Mr. Schneider suggested, would be fine. We would ask to extend that date to as far out as reasonably practical, so that any construction would have time to take place. And I'll throw out a back-end number and see if the board is comfortable with that. I would prefer something different, but maybe 36 months to give ample time for that to take place would be our proposal if the board is so inclined.
I see we got some hands up. Helen?
She's still mute. Okay, there she is.
Board may consider a 36 months and if necessary, come back in front of the board and request an extension. The board may want to consider 36 months and come back in front of the board and request an extension if necessary, or pay into the tree bank.
Brian?
Yeah, I just want to note that 36 months does fall within the terms of office of both the parish president and the council. So I would be very agreeable to the 36-month timeline.
Jules?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Morone.
Go ahead, you can ask Mr. Morone.
Mr. Morone, I'm assuming that you all are trying to clear this property and for lack of a better term, preload with the fill for future construction. That construction at this point is not imminent. on that property?
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Guidry. That is correct.
Thank you.
Jules,
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to approve with the 36-month stipulation timeline.
we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Helen, you had a question?
And what will be next after the 36 months if it's not completed?
I think they'd have to come back for an extension or pay into the tree bank.
So you would let them come back in front of the board and let the board make a decision? And I see Regan's hand up, so maybe we could acknowledge.
Regan?
Yes, I just wanted to remind the board that the paying into the tree bank is supposed to be a last resort. So I don't want it to become the default. If we can't figure something out, throw money at it, because that is not what it's written for. It's a 60-something acre parcel, and it's not a lot of trees. I think they can find a place to plant the trees on the parcel.
Anything else? Any other questions from board members? Helen?
She's muted.
Unmute.
Jules, will you repeat your motion? So
Okay. Yes, that we approve, subject to the 36-month timeline. Helen did ask, what would we do after the 36 months? And I did, in consideration of Regan's comments, would ask that they would, after 36 months, considering it's a 60-acre site, that they would find a place to plant the trees. It's not that many.
Okay. Does everyone understand that motion?
Yes.
We had a second. Do we have any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, would everyone please vote by raising your hand if you're in favor? Motion passes. Our next case is BOA case number 20201869 BOA, request by applicant in an HC3 Highway Commercial Zoning District for an after-the-fact variance of the removal of existing trees originally approved to be preserved. The property is located at 68348 US Highway 190 Service Road, Covington, Louisiana. The applicant and representative is CarMax Auto Superstore. The applicant is requesting an after-the-fact variance of the removal of existing trees originally approved to be preserved. Staff comments, please.
The applicant previously received a variance 2018-904 BOA, to remove 19 trees from the buffer adjacent to the I-12 in order to provide visibility to the CarMax site. Staff worked with the applicant to select 19 trees to be removed and retain the healthiest trees in the buffer. However, the 19 trees to be removed were preserved, and the trees to be preserved were removed. This happened on accident. In addition to the trees removed, some of the remaining trees were damaged, and the ground plane was left with gravel and no living material as required under the landscape ordinance. The after-the-fact variance request is to allow for the replanting of the buffer. According to the original tree survey and prior to construction, there were 45 trees located within the buffer. Since no mitigation plan has been submitted, staff recommends the following. 1, provide an updated landscape plan showing the species, caliber, and location of the remaining existing trees within the buffer. 2, remove the gravel from the roadside and provide the mulch below existing trees and grass in the disturbed area where the construction trailer was parked. 3, pay 3 inches of mitigation for each tree removed to the St. Tammany Parish Tree Bank. And 4, if any of the remaining trees die, Class A trees shall be replanted within the buffer instead of further contributions to the tree bank.
Is the applicant present?
My name is Bill Martis. I'm with Donahue Fabric. CarMax is not on the line. I'm here on their behalf today.
Okay, will you please give us your address, Mr. Mattis?
My name is Bill Martis. My address is 3030 East Causeway Approach, Mandeville, Louisiana.
Mr. Martis, do you have anything further to add?
What Regan said was true. When the guys started clearing the trees, they accidentally took a few of the trees out that were called to remain. We stopped the contractor immediately once we determined they were removing the wrong trees. And at that point, my superintendent called Ms. Regan out to the site. They looked at the situation, went over everything. No more clearing of the wrong trees was done at that point. They cleared the proper trees at that point, but there was an area, particularly in the southwest corner of the site, right there along the interstate, where the construction trailer was at, where the wrong trees were removed. Going forward, we just want to figure out what we need to do to make it right with the parish, and get it addressed and taken care of.
Mr. Snyder, you had a question?
No, only
I'm
I
sorry,
guess.
I saw your light up. I'm sorry.
There we go. No, I from what Mr. Martis just said is that they will do whatever is necessary to please the parish. And so question to him for the items listed, are all those agreeable?
If I could hear those one more time, they went pretty quick.
Did I get a copy of the staff comments prior to this meeting?
There are 4 items, and if they're in agreement with all 4, then I would make a motion. But
I'd like to double number 3.
I don't have a copy of those comments.
I can reread them if you would like, and of course we can send you a copy of the comments as well if you have not previously received that.
Yes, ma'am. I would love to have a copy of the comments sent to me, and if you can reread them, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Go ahead. Reagan, you can read them.
I was just waiting for whoever to.
Whoever's got a phone needs to turn off the phone.
That's me.
Okay.
So the 4 comments are as follows. Number 1, provide an updated landscape plan showing the species, caliber, and location of the remaining existing trees within the buffer.
Can definitely do that.
Okay. Number 2, remove the gravel from the roadside and provide mulch below the existing trees and grass in the disturbed area where the construction trailer was parked.
I can definitely remove that gravel up there and mulch that area. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And number 3, pay 3 inches of mitigation for each tree removed to the St. Tammany Parish Tree Bank. And just as a note, normally the minimum required tree to save is normally 6 inches. So I was just going with half of that, assuming that any trees out there would at least be 6 inches. So said 3 inches of mitigation.
Okay.
And number 4 is if any of the remaining trees die that were damaged during construction, that a Class A tree be replanted in the buffer instead of paying mitigation to the tree bank.
Just for my information, what's a Class A tree?
Oh, it's just a shade tree or oak tree. It's as opposed to something like a shrub or an understory holly or something like that.
What caliber is a Class A tree?
A Class A is 2 to 2.5 inches in caliber and 10 to 12 feet tall.
Okay.
Mr. Martis, staff just emailed you a copy of the staff comments. I don't know if you can get your emails right there, right now.
Yes, sir. I've got them right here with me. There, I just got it from Miss Helen. Just picked it up.
Yes.
I guess my only concern, my only question would be is item number 2 is remove the gravel and the mulch where the construction trailer was at. We are just talking about the area where the trailer was at, not down the entire side of the road there. Because, you know, that whole, if we're talking about that whole side of the road, that is quite quite an area.
It's whatever was disturbed during construction. So,
Because our original landscape plan called for nothing on that side of the road, other than to remove the trees. That was approved through the parish.
may I respond to that? I don't want to speak out of turn.
Who would have that, Reagan?
I was just going to say that it's a buffer, it's a green space. So anything that is within a green space is supposed to be left seeded, sodded, or mulched per the code. So basically that's what we're trying to get back to, is just making sure that the buffers are seeded, sodded, or mulched, and we don't have any place that's just construction debris or gravel or whatever.
Yeah, as long as it's one of those three, seeded, sodded, or mulched, I can definitely come out there and have it seeded, hydro-seeded, whatever needs to be done like that. You know, we have done quite a bit out there, and we did clear the DOT right away as well on the other side of the fence. So yeah, we can definitely have it seeded.
So I guess, Mr. Waters, what it leads up to you, do you agree to all those terms? Just be modifying your request.
I do agree to those four items in that manner.
Mr. Brookton?
I want to make a motion to approve the variance.
You broke up.
I want to make a motion to approve the variance.
But with the staff comments, or just?
With the staff comments included, all four.
All four? You broke up, Mr. Brookton. All four comments?
I want to make a motion to approve the variance with all four of the comments that the staff had in question.
Okay, I could barely hear you, but I heard you that time. Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Who said that?
Jules.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any comments or questions? I see Mr. Tom.
Now I was responding to my wife. I'm good.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw you raise your hand. Okay, any other, does anyone have any comments or questions? Hearing no comments or questions, would everyone please vote on a motion by raising your hand in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Our next case is BOA case number 20201874 BOA. This case has been withdrawn. So going to our final case is BOA case number 20201875 BOA. Request by applicant in an A2 suburban zoning district to reduce the required front yard setback from 50 feet to 40 feet to allow for the construction of an accessory building. The property is located at 38144 Joan Drive, Pearl River, Louisiana. The applicant and representative is Gerald Foster. The applicant is requesting to reduce the required front yard setback from 50 feet to 40 feet to allow for the construction of an accessory building. Staff comments, please.
I can't hear.
You show us off, your mic off, Helen?
Helen, you're not on.
You're on now.
Staff is not opposed to the request, considering that the proposed location of the accessory building will allow for the preservation of the live oak trees and will not create a visual impact on the adjacent properties, since the lot is located in the cul-de-sac.
Is the applicant present?
Yes, sir. Cindy Forrester, 38144 Joan Drive, Pearl River, Louisiana.
Ms. Forrester, do you have anything further to add?
I do not.
Do we have any questions from anyone on the board? Mr. Ballantyne?
Yeah, I went out, I looked at this, job, and it's one of those trapezoidal, the property, is next to their, existing residence. And it's one of those trapezoidal, odd shaped, lots, in a cul-de-sac. And, I would make a motion to approve the variance, as requested.
We have a
Second.
motion, and we have a motion and a second to approve. Do we have any questions or discussion from anyone on the board?
Who's second?
Mr. Snyder?
Mr. Snyder.
Yes.
No,
I-
you're just asking who seconded.
Right.
Any questions or concerns from anyone? Hearing none, would everyone please vote by raising your hands in favor?
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes all our cases for today. Old business?
I have no old business.
Thank you. Any new business? Helen?
We have approximately 4 new cases for the month of July.
We have 4 new cases for the month of July. Hopefully, since we have to advertise 30 days in advance, I don't see a problem of doing it in the chambers here. We can,
Concur.
everybody sit up in front. We got dividers up here, and we can, separate everyone in the audience. So I would like to propose that we have our next meeting in the chambers and not doing it via Zoom.
No objection.
Say again?
No objection.
Okay, how does everyone feel about that?
Sounds good.
Good to me.
Okay, well, hearing that, our next meeting will be in the board. So I'll move to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody, for signing up, and I know it was a little bit tedious. Our first time on Zoom, but I think we all did well. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Did
Good
well.
job, Tim.
Yes,
Good job, Tim.
thank you.
Good job, Tim. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good job.
See y'all next time.